I'm Dee Dee Wills. Thank you so much, Dada, for inviting me to participate. It is a great honor, and it's wonderful to see old friends and to make new friends, like my new buddy Vikas. And um, I want to say that my feeling after this day of hearing everybody is that you and everybody achieved something very, very powerful and wonderful and enduring. And you should feel fantastic about it. I'm sorry the administrators have left. Actually, maybe I'm not, because I might say a few things that, that they might not like too much. Tata asked me to preface my remarks with a little more self-introduction than you got in the bio, in the brief bio. So I'll just say a few things which I think are pertinent to why I love Ahimsa and think it is a great approach to education and, in fact, everything else. You may think these are stupid, but I took 4 years of Latin in high school. It was not useful to me for learning the African languages that I subsequently learned, but it was great for the French and Spanish. From this, I realized that it hadn't been wasted, even though I thought so at the time. Our students frequently ask us, why do I have to learn this? And they may not even know at the time or even soon, but sooner or later, things are not wasted that we've learned. I'm not sure about that advanced algebra, but I wrote a Star Trek novel many years ago when I was unemployed during my time of being an itinerant scholar. I had some periods of unemployment. So I wrote a Star Trek novel and submitted it to one of the mainstream publishers of the series of Star Trek novels, which unfortunately for my manuscript was dominated by much better writers than I, who also were famous science fiction writers. So they rejected me. But there were a lot of things called fanzines around then before the internet. And I belonged to a science fiction fan club, and they said they would publish it, and they did as a fanzine. So people read it. From this, I learned that the investment of my time and energy and little writing skill had not been wasted, that at least some people liked it, and that you can achieve things with help from other people that you couldn't get done by yourself. I've published a lot of stuff subsequently, but that was the most important to me in a personal way, that I wrote a Star Trek novel. A very seriously important experience that I had was when I was teaching in northern Nigeria at the University of Maiduguri. This country was under a military dictatorship at the time. The 2 years that I was there were years of tumult and protest and terrible, terrible problems on the campus where I was. And the military government, in order to stop the protests, brought the soldiers onto the campuses and into the streets. I was up in Maiduguri, which is, well, it's the home of Boko Haram today. But at that time, Boko Haram didn't exist, but it was still a pretty rough place. They brought the military onto the campus, and they shot at the students who had shown up to stand up for their right to strike against the unjust policies of the government. And so that was the most shocking experience I had, having already had plenty of exposure to injustice, poverty, and inequity in that and other countries where I had done research. The students were purged from the campus. Some of them came to my house in town where I housed them as refugees. And you can imagine the administration did not care for that at the university at all, but they allowed me to finish out my contract. But in addition to that display of violence on the part of a government that was essentially a terrorist activity against its own people, I saw heroic young people, popular leaders, farmers, artists, and intellectuals working together to stand up for their right to freedom from government oppression and corruption. Uh, One other fact about me before I get after Miss Tara there. I got involved in the civil rights movement when I was a teenager in the summer of 1963. I was inspired by Dr. King, and I happened to be in an area where James Meredith was conducting some demonstrations, and I joined a march. You remember him. He was the fellow who tried to integrate Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, and was successful, except that the University of Mississippi had to call the federal government for help because the white bigots in the area all came and started making trouble for poor Mr. Meredith. Anyway, he was leading a march, and I joined that, and that was my introduction to the civil rights movement. And it moved me. This was shortly before the I Have a Dream March on Washington. It opened my eyes to the reality that nonviolent protest in the context of an organized movement can actually achieve some social justice and change. Subsequently, I've been involved in the women's movement, anti-war, many, many other things, including the current pro-democracy resistance movement. Satya landed on planet Kalpali Pomona in 1991, 3 years after I got here. Our college was very pleased to welcome her, as I recall, particularly because of her credentials as a South Asia historian and Gandhi specialist. We had undertaken an internationalization of the curriculum agenda at the time, and she was a great part of that. When she began to develop the plan for the Ahimsa Center and the other programs, I was very eager to get on board, even though she was not a Star Trek fan. The core philosophy and activities of nonviolence studies integrated coursework and scholarship across the campus, which I've always loved interdisciplinary collaboration, and this was a perfect example of how well it could work. With my anthropology background and life experience, I thought I might have something to contribute to the project. And I knew I would learn a lot from working with such colleagues and students as would be attracted to it too. This morning and afternoon, you've heard people who are much more knowledgeable than I talking about Satya and Satyagraha. But I chose my title, Ahimsa and Satya, to elide the nonviolence part with the education part. In my understanding, Satya is truth and knowledge and wisdom. And in Gandhi's terms, Satyagraha is truth in action, or what's the other term? Intention, the intention of truth. In my opinion, what is education for, if not truth? To lead us out of ignorance, dogma, falsehood, and into the wider world of what we can know. What's up with these objects out here? What are the linkages among the facts that we find? And so on. Granted, students don't have the luxury of browsing every field at the expense of acquiring practical expertise in a few of them. This is often presented as a reason to not offer things like Ahimsa programs, namely, well, they have to be here for practical purposes. I understand that. They will have to get jobs unless they graduate into a permanent underclass of those replaced by AI, which I'm just being funny, understand. I hope and pray that will never happen. But we scholars always have to reckon with the fact that facts themselves are slippery beasts. And it is hard to communicate and become knowledgeable about knowledge itself. So students have to wrestle with the problem of the transitory, contingent, epistemologically troublesome nature of facts. What does Satya have to do with, if Satya represents education here, what does it have to do with Ahimsa? Well, this idea of truth force or insistence on truth, if we don't have that perspective of Ahimsa, that insistence or force may become a literal forcing of a policy or a belief onto others, disguised as truth. We see this all the time today. And so we have to watch out for this overstepping all the time, whether it's on our part or it's on the part of the media or on the part of politicians who lead or mislead us. Some may also may think that not only do they think sometimes that Ahimsa is passive, but they think that university education is passive or inert, that, oh, that's just book learning. We're in some ivory tower up here. But on the contrary, we can offer learning as a life experience itself to empower future adventures and achievements. How can we be or become nonviolent? We're surrounded by violence of all kinds. The university has to present these realities to students so they will know enough about the world to see the good as well as the bad. The path of nonviolence, of justice, peace, and love is the way to put learning and knowledge into respectful practice. Ahimsa and Satya are both about connections and community. That is why some form of nonviolent studies should be part of all education. The kind of teaching and learning involved in nonviolent studies and the Ahimsa principles cannot be gamified or AI'd. It's not an innovation or disruption. To instill the Ahimsa perspective and way of life requires for learners to have experts or practitioners of the field or skill to demonstrate it, guides or mentors to explain it and facilitate learning, peers and interested parties, and the materials and facilities to explore it, books, labs, field trips, etc. Notice I didn't mention institutional leadership in that list. We may not need it. It might not matter if the center isn't in its former robust form, or if it isn't even a center. If we can implant the university and the activities of Ahimsa more deeply into the community, we don't have to uproot ourselves. I mean, we're still here. We can reach out to each other and continue to involve the university. We don't want to get rid of schools. We want to make it bigger than it was. We see Ahimsa already working all around us. Unfortunately, so are these other principles or lack thereof. We need nonviolence education more than ever before. It should be conceived in service to the broader community, as it has always been. Ahimsa studies should be a vital piece of university culture for the foreseeable future. If it were up to me, the center and the programs would not close their doors. However, a strong foundation has been laid for continuation in a different form. Our society, our country, in fact, the world, need to have more individuals and communities well-versed in the principles and applications of nonviolence in political and everyday life. This can only happen through education. Let's find ways to support this world-saving effort. I'll close with a quotation from Colson Whitehead's recent article. You probably know him from Nickel Boys. It was a novel, and then they made a film out of it. He's a very smart guy. So he says, I believe in an old-fashioned virtue called doing the freaking work. Read the book, not the summary. Write the piece, not the prompt. Suffer like the artist you are, or educator. I put that in. It ain't easy, but if it were easy, it wouldn't be worth doing. Thank you very much.